When we last experienced Tom reviewing books to everyone's disappointment, he never actually did his series on the Ultimate Book Marathon. So, he got posted a letter from a mysterious stranger in hoping he receives it and what is about to happen for failing his series.
Hey, not too shabby when a company wants to collaborate with TJ Productions. So, let's see. What pleasantries do you have to say about me?
Dear TJ Productions, I'm glad to see you continue to do videos on your channel. I realise how on earth you could post YouTube videos at your output, considering only someone with no life, hobbies or friends could do it.
I mean, what can I say? Can't reveal my secrets.
Anyway, we've been watching you for a long time, to the moment when you were even born. It was rather amusing to see you completely lose your shit reviewing what you perceive terrible Doctor Who stories.
Well, I'm glad my suffering entertained you.
But we ain't finished. You owe us. The fact you failed in your book marathon video in 2017, insulted Doctor Who with your reviews, means you need to pay. P.S. We all hate you. So we DMC strike your channel in 2019.
Wonderful. Dealing with these guys, huh?
So now you're in our debt.
What do I have to do, huh?
You have two options. You either kidnapped and forced to listen to Necromantia on loop for 10 years.
Necromantia.
Or you review this book I have in this parcel. That's right. You need to review every Virgin New Adventure. If you fail, you listen to Necromantia for 10 years on loop.
Oh, son of a bitch! In what world will I be reviewing Timewyrm Genesys again? Timewyrm Genesys again? How? Why? But it seems that I am entertaining this again. Enjoy. So hello and welcome everybody to a new series on the channel by reviewing every single Doctor Who Virgin New Adventure. With the Virgin New Adventures being the most infamous and notorious series in the history of Doctor Who, full of violence, blood, gore, drugs, sex, and acts the new series would die of a heart attack to even comprehend the levels the Virgin New Adventures go to, Timewyrm Genesys definitely is one that starts out with a bang in that department. The series started out the Timewyrm series with Genesis, Exodus, Apocalypse, and Revelation. And then John Peel jumped to the scene like Roadrunner and written the first story, Genesis. But at what cost? So I reviewed this thing back in 2017. The original review, if you so wish to see it, it's the most long-winded thing I've probably ever uploaded. That's on the second channel. So it is a little bit like deja vu, this is. So, this book has an immediate red flag to it. Moment of how this book happened. John Peel, like the flipping Roadrunner, jumped to the opportunity to get the first original Doctor Who novel out in the Virgin New Adventures. And he wrote, put this in perspective here, he wrote for a TARDIS team he's not very fond of. Talk about a red flag. Because this has some of the worst depictions of characterization for both the Doctor and Ace. So the only reason why this exists is status, really. And that's fine, but the red flag, you need to put it into perspective. You need to acknowledge that John Peel is writing for the 7th Doctor and Ace, and in a period where he's not too fond of. So of course the characterization is not going to be very good. And no, it isn't. That's not the only thing. There is no development of supporting characters. If there is development, it is not good at all. Wink wink Gilgamesh. Terrible pacing. Full of padding and no exposition and to describe the setting of Mesopotamia and the city of Kish and Uruk. Nowhere to be seen. It seems like my thoughts and feelings back in 2017 hasn't really changed. Let's see, with me being 26 years old now, flipping out, let's see how it's a little bit different, because I've took it less out of the bias of what I said in the original review, and in fact I never even went back to it to give me any form of bias at all. I wanted to go into it fresh, which I did. Putting 2 and 2 together, it's more like, yeah, it doesn't seem like much has changed with my second reading and my second time I am entertaining this review. Now, when I first read the Timewyrm series, it sort of encapsulates the series. It's mixed. Originally, I considered Genesys terrible. Still do, as a matter of fact. Exodus was terrific. Apocalypse was okay and very forgettable. And Revelation, I couldn't for the life of me remember it. I can't remember a single thing about the book. And I don't have any video to reference it because the original video was deleted permanently. The main threat is called the Timewyrm, a universal terror which is regarded as being a considerable horror as a creature from the Black Books of Gallifrey, reminiscent of a dragon. The Daleks refer to the Timewyrm as a twister of paths, and ancient Earth referred to her as Hell. Simply just the word Hell. The Doctor recorded the Timewyrm as simply the apocalypse and the horror. So, I gotta admit, the premise of the whole Timewyrm arc of hunting down a supernatural and extremely powerful entity on the levels of like the Chronivores or Sutekh from the Pyramids of Mars is quite exciting. And I would say from start to finish, Genesis to Revelation, it's a very good way to introduce yourself into the Virgin New Adventures. Even though, if I was going to be absolutely honest, you don't really have to start with the Timewyrm series. I think Nightshade is a perfect start in my opinion, or even Human Nature. So the Virgin New Adventures actually start pretty quickly in establishing like arcs, whereas the EDAs, they kind of messed about a little bit. And then it sort of like kicked off strong with alien bodies, and then like midway through, that's where it gets very, very heavy within arcs. So in Virgin New Adventures, it's straight in there, no messing about. We're going to throw you 2 arcs straight from the bat. Timewyrm series in Cat's Cradle, and even Cat's Cradle itself starts off many mini arcs. Anyway, enough pickles and pimples. We are reviewing Timewyrm Genesys by John Peel. And hopefully the last. Timewyrm Genesys is one of the few Doctor Who stories I rated very poorly. So much, it kind of has a reputation in the series, but totally for the wrong reasons. Was I expecting my thoughts to change quite drastically? No, I was quite confident that even with my second reading, going into it, that it would still be at least under a 5 out of 10, which it is under a 5 out of 10. I do not believe this is a good book. It can put off a lot of people, but then again, when you finished it, you've got a much better book to reward yourself by getting through Timewyrm Genesys. So if you look at it from that perspective, then yeah, you deserve it. The premise: the Doctor and Ace travel to the beginning of civilization, also referred to as the cradle of civilization, of segregated cities, with the city of Uruk, ruled by the first Hero King Gilgamesh, which we will get to fairly shortly, and in the city of Kish. In the heart of the city, someone is referred to as Ishtar, the goddess, with her followers under her influence and completely submissive to her will, who is in fact the mystical terror of the Timewyrm. Now the prologue, I actually quite liked. I quite like the prologue to this setup of how Ishtar was consuming people on a spaceship that so happened to crash land in the cradle of civilization, Mesopotamia, the city of Kish. So that is how the Timewyrm makes her way into Timewyrm Genesys, and how her influence and will has took over the city of Kish. So she, the Timewyrm, is building up her strength by literally feeding off people's minds, and that is how she gets her power. She almost has a thrill of danger and kills anybody who even slightly annoys her, which puts a lot of pressure and apprehension with all the members and the society within Kish. Most of them don't like the Timewyrm. They're either completely afraid of her or resentful that she just landed in Kish, appearing as a goddess with Ishtar, but the fact that she can actually read people's minds, so she knows exactly who's going against her will. Surprisingly, a good prologue. I quite liked it. Don't know if I said that in my original review. I don't remember it and I didn't refer to it. Give credit where credit's due. I'm a little bit more mature now when it comes to my reviews. I'm not just going F this, F that. This is a piece of garbage. This is a piece of shit or anything like that. I'm just a little bit more structured, a little bit more concise, a little bit more laid back, even though I will throw smoke at it when it deserves it, and it surely will. But I thought the prologue was pretty good. Then we will proceed to Gilgamesh confronting Ishtar, which I will always refer to the Timewyrm as Ishtar following this review. I honestly couldn't tell if I was enjoying his character, or just laughing at it. I honestly don't know. The interactions between Ishtar and Gilgamesh is beyond hilarious. Ishtar is trying to manipulate his masculinity and try to seduce him, and Gilgamesh, being the ginormous sexist that he is, saying that women can't fight and all that. Ishtar then reveals her powers, but this goes against Ishtar, and then Gilgamesh sees Ishtar as a threat and does not get control by her will and retreats. Ishtar is then very angry, but she got rejected, even though she wanted to consume and rip out his brain. Gilgamesh, the proud hero king of Uruk, is a character with a ginormous ego, and he hates himself that he has to be sneaky to get into Kish. His pride is that big that he wants confrontation all the time. His ego is so big it would make my forehead look small in comparison. This character is just ridiculous. So Gilgamesh, knowing, even though it's a bit of a strike to his ego, that Ishtar can annihilate Gilgamesh at any point in time, he does in fact retreat, and that is what riles up Ishtar. And then there's this whole subplot of Ishtar trying to get back at Gilgamesh, which then involves Ace covering for Gilgamesh, which the Doctor orders, which I will get into one of the worst negatives ever, but you have to wait for it, as we are still talking about Gilgamesh at the moment. John Peel writing Gilgamesh is like a living contradiction. I can't tell if John Peel is writing Gilgamesh as a man full of wisdom or a complete and utter dumbass. Gilgamesh, how he's written, is literally like a black hole collapsing in on itself and imploding. Then a glowing phoenix spawns from it, only to be obliterated by a ceiling fan. It is incomprehensible, the characterization of Gilgamesh. It is a contradiction. I can't tell if he's a man full of wisdom or just a complete, utter idiot. It's comical for all the wrong reasons, but if I'm laughing at something and I'm having a good time, then is that truly a negative? I guess it's like a Dominator situation where it's so bad it's good. Maybe it's that. Ishtar does quite well to manipulate Gilgamesh in the beginning stages, because like she understands how to manipulate men basically, but she made the mistake of revealing her power. So Gilgamesh actually did the smart thing by retreating. So there's a very funny duality between Ishtar and Gilgamesh. They're like two sides of the same coin, but both of them are just completely terrible. Ishtar's literally controlling people and being extremely seductive, and then Gilgamesh just horrible in many ways too, which I will list what he does very shortly. So we know Gilgamesh is one of the characters which is quite forefront here. What about the rest of the supporting characters? They have nothing. Nothing. Nothing! I want you to do this. Whenever you read Timewyrm Genesys, give it a few days, see if you remember any of the supporting characters besides Gilgamesh. Give it a week or so. I'll surprise you even get 2 characters. They are so damn one-dimensional. This book was 100% rushed. Good old John Peel being the good old roadrunner, getting that first Doctor Who original novel for the Virgin New Adventures. Yeah, that bit back at John Peel, because the supporting characters, flipping hell, they are one-dimensional. The only one which jumps out to me is Ingula. And that might not be for the best reasons, actually, but yeah. One-dimensional John Peel. This is what you get for rushing a book out to be number 1, eh? Yeah, that backfired. To not be completely 100% negative, you do understand the motivations for some of the characters and how they view and perceive either Gilgamesh or Ishtar. And then that becomes the whole reason, really, of why these characters are here. Just to make statements and viewpoints of Ishtar and Gilgamesh. Do they have no personality of their own? No, they do not. But rereading it, I have actually seen worse. I have seen worse. So, not 100% terrible. But yeah, I did actually like that about Genesys, how some of the characters had resentment towards either Ishtar or Gilgamesh. One being with Gilgamesh, that he literally steals people's wives and gives less of a shit that he's actually doing it. I mean, going back to Gilgamesh, if you heard a certain man saying he has concubines with him, that is flipping disgusting. In other words, sexual slaves. Flipping hell. I probably am going to be demonetized by actually reviewing these Virgin New Adventures books. I swear to God, I probably am. So how do the 7th Doctor and Ace get on the scene? They actually get projections from the 4th Doctor warning about the Timewyrm, which I believe that warning came sometime after the invasion of time, to be completely precise. And this is where John Peel adds some continuity into this book, which prevents and continuity errors by the 7th Doctor wiping out pretty much useless memories. So John Peel integrates that in the early chapters with the 7th Doctor and Ace. Like, one example is the 5th Doctor went to Alaska. The 7th Doctor mentions he's never been to Alaska. That, for example. But yeah, John Peel is very similar to Craig Hinton. Expect a lot of continuity fan wanking. and let's be honest, I am not going to get into it. Just, if you like continuity, then you should, just enjoy it for yourself. I'm not going to mention it. So the Doctor and Ace naturally get embroiled into what Gilgamesh is planning to do, which is invade the city of Kish. This man can only understand two things. If he sees a man, he wants to beat him senselessly until his death. If he sees a woman, he's like, oh, swiggity swooty, I'm coming for the booty. Ishtar herself, a Timewyrm, I thought she was portrayed very well in this book. You definitely have that level of threat of her influence and her power, and how the people around her are just flipping terrified of her, which this is literally just the beginning, because it's not the height of the Timewyrm's power. We see even more in Exodus, following on until the last story, Revelation. So I can't really fault Ishtar in this book. I think John Peel did Ishtar very well. Of course, it was like over the top with the seductions and the sexual innuendos and like the sexual references. It is very contrived, I got to admit. But her level of intimidation and threat, very high. So Ishtar is pretty damn good. You see, and then you see this mental battle between people trying to resist her, but then she can just read people's thoughts, so she knows who's, well, against her. And she also does this as a tactic to get more information out of people and what's around her. So she uses it as her advantage. Then you have the whole subplot with Engula and Nanina, a slave within the city of Kish, has plans and wants to deal with Ishtar. And Engula actually acts as like a support system to Nanina, and the both of them, I thought that was actually quite good. Just some level of like decent character development. Again, it's not great, and it's not very, it doesn't last very long, these two characters. But yeah, Nanina is pretty much a captive for her own protection. So the two of them are kind of in like similar situations, and I think a similar age too, 15 years old. So you can sympathize with their predicament and situation that they're in. And we probably get to maybe, actually no, actually I think they're tied, some of the worst moments in Timewyrm Genesys I have ever read in my entire life in an original Doctor Who novel. So the 7th Doctor has like these moments in his head that he feels bad about what's happened to his previous companions throughout the history of his life, and he's wanting not anything to happen to Ace. This is where we come to one of the dumbest moments. I understand why John Peel did it. It's like connections to Nightshade. The way he did it is so dumb. So unbelievably dumb. The 7th Doctor wishes Ace to stay with Gilgamesh on her own and surrounded by a bunch of drunk men. Ace naturally feels very uncomfortable with this, and this is the whole connections with Nightshade of Ace just getting fed up with the Doctor just being a manipulator and not disclosing the full picture and just always doing stuff behind Ace's back. What does the 7th Doctor say to Ace to stay with Gilgamesh? Gilgamesh is an alright guy. Don't complain. Gilgamesh is an unpredictable and dangerous rapist who has no control over his urges and instincts and is a complete primitive. And then the 7th Doctor goes on to say about a rapist that he's kind of an alright guy and that you shouldn't complain. That is crazy. That is crazy. I know the Seventh Doctor throughout the Virgin New Adventures does things that are questionable, but the way it was executed here, it feels like bad writing. Because things happen where Ace resents the Doctor in like Exodus and so on. Cat's Cradle. But it was just so badly executed. Yeah, that is a shocking negative. Gilgamesh, an alright guy. I would hate to see who a terrible guy is in the face of a John Peel's Seventh Doctor. Because flippin' hell, was that shocking. On so many levels, is that dumb, stupid, creepy, insulting, juvenile, and just plain stupid. That you would even characterize the Seventh Doctor to say something so outlandish. How it was incorporated in the build-up to Nightshade of Ace resenting the Doctor was done so much better in Exodus. Similar themes of the Doctor just using Ace and putting her in these difficult situations, but here it's just dumb. It's just flipping dumb. Okay. Even though I thought the first 100 pages were, I would say, okay, it wasn't as bad as I was fearing it to be. First 100 pages, I found it in places enjoyable. Some scenes absolutely flippin' stupid, but I would admit it's enjoyable for the most part. Then we came to another glaring issue, just as ridiculous as the Seventh Doctor saying Gilgamesh is an alright guy and Ace shouldn't complain. Now it involves Ace doing something just absolutely outlandish, but you would never expect the character to do something so un-Ace-like. She would never do anything like this. It's not her character, and even though she takes a very brutish, assertive direction in the later Virgin New Adventures after Deceit, she would still not do so. Well, I haven't read them, so maybe I shouldn't make that statement. But I just don't see Ace doing something as bad as this. What does our beloved Ace do in this book? Ace threatening and putting Ngula, a 15-year-old girl who is pretty much a slave, in a chokehold, is just something she would never do. And I would read this. This is how it goes. She gagged in her words as Ace accidentally tightened her grip in excitement to smash the girl into a stoned pillar and elbow her in the throat in an attempt to gather information on the Doctor's whereabouts in the city of Kish, Ishtar's temple. What the hell was that? Ace accidentally tightening her chokehold on a young girl and then getting excited out of it? Then simultaneously feel uncomfortable around Gilgamesh. These contradictions in the characters is driving me flipping ballistic. It's crazy. But that is just something I would never see Ace doing. Nothing as outlandish as choking a young girl and somehow getting sadistic thrills from it. Does that sound like Ace to you? Is that Ace? That doesn't sound like Ace to me. And to pretty much 100% of people probably watching. I just don't know why John Peel did that. But it goes to show that he wrote for a TARDIS team he's not too fond of. Therefore, characterization is just going to be shocking in places, which it is. It is shocking. So the Doctor suffers from characterization. Gilgamesh's characterization is pretty dumb in some places. And Ace as well suffers in this book. So this goes to show where status is more important than the actual content of the story. This is just Timewyrm Genesys in a nutshell. The book wouldn't exist if it wasn't John Peel getting status of the first original Doctor Who adventure in the New Adventures. That is all that this book is. It's a status piece. But now it's become infamous for the complete wrong reasons. It is infamous for being shit. But if you actually get enjoyment from the book, that's fair play, because reading it now, because I can see parts where I enjoyed it, but the glaring issues that I had with it in 2017 are still there for me. They are so obvious, the drawbacks of this novel. You just cannot get them out of your minds. It will always be in place. So if you read this book and you hated it, chances are you will hate it again if you read it 5 years later. It's just, I doubt it would change for you. I can't think what's the worst part of this book. Is it Gilgamesh's characterization? Is it the 7th Doctor's characterization? Or is it Ace's characterization? They're just all equally terrible. I would say there's not too much to this novel. It's fairly simple in its premise, especially compared to like Exodus and 100% Revelation. But after the 100 page mark, and you shouldn't expect this from quite a thin Doctor Who book, short Doctor Who novel, which is just about over 200 pages, where the average is usually 280, just all rounding up to 300 pages. That's very apparent for the BBC books, which ones to be more consistent. Virgin New Adventures vary, but this actually has padding in the second half of the book. There is an attempt to try and focus on the supporting characters, to establish their own stories, but as I've previously stated, it's just all there as a plot device to build up Ishtar's character to be a threatening force, or to showcase Gilgamesh to be a complete and utter tool. That is all that they are used for. It is some of the most bland, boring, one-dimensional characterization. It's very back and forward with going to the city of Kish, then to the Uruk, but then not really having a coherent plan. And even Gilgamesh saying that the Doctor is a man of wisdom, why does he not ever have plans when he's going back and forward towards the cities? It's like it's doing it nonsensically for no reason whatsoever, and it just ends up being padded. Time spent in Uruk, these cities, Kish and Uruk, are just not fleshed out whatsoever. There's no exposition in the build-up of the environment and the atmosphere. It is non-existent. Alright, I think I have mentioned far enough negatives whatsoever, so I'm going to try and be as unbiased as humanly possible and attempt to cover the positives that I found in Timewyrm Genesys. Timewyrm, along with Genesys, of Ace building resentment to the Doctor, which proceeds into Nightshade, and then we see the results to that in Deceit. Ace pretty much feels like a pawn on a chessboard. John Peel could really do the concept of rape. It's alright to focus on it, but you really gotta execute it correctly. In here it's just flipping dumb. Necromantia does the same thing too, which again, it is flipping dumb. But even though Ace is a very headstrong, independent character, even she has her... She thinks a lot of sense, but she knows situations can be dangerous for her. So this book simultaneously has good and bad characterization for Ace. Forget about her attacking a little girl. This book is just outlandish. But near the end of the book, we finally get the confrontation of the Doctor with the Timewyrm Ishtar. You have this whole subplot involving the virus, and the book ends with some understanding how powerful the Timewyrm really is, and we see that right at the end, and that leads into Exodus. But this is definitely built up to see the Timewyrm in her true form. How the Doctor puts it, the apocalypse, the horror of something which is more like a tornado or a hurricane in the universe. But the final chapter I thought was pretty good. So, Timewyrm Genesys. Entertained it for the second time. Overall, it's a ridiculous start for the Timewyrm series. It is a absolutely baffling, outlandish start for the Timewyrm series. Do you have to read it? Really, you don't. But if you're gonna start with the Timewyrm series, yeah, you could jump to Exodus, but think of it like this. If you're doing a marathon, when you finish this, you've got Exodus to enjoy. So you've survived this torture. Then you've got I can definitely say that Exodus is just the superior novel to this, and it basically does everything right, which this is trying to do, which I would say in many aspects with minimal effort. The first half, in some aspects, like the plot, like building up Ishtar, was honestly quite good. After that, it flipping fumbles. Near and after the 100-page mark, fumbles it. It turns absolutely revolting. It stinks. This book is like the stench in the Timewyrm series and maybe the Virgin New Adventures as a whole. It's infamous for a reason. Who knew I would read this again? I rated it a 2 out of 10 in my original review. Now, what do I rate it? I'm really putting into perspective here. I'm putting everything together about this book, about the positives that I'm trying to think about this novel, and then all the negatives. I might have to have a jump cut here to actually think of a rating. I don't think this book has really changed for me with a rating. I still think I'm going to rate this a 2 out of 10. I can predict that it might not end up the worst Virgin New Adventure out of the lot, but it's certainly going to be bottom of the barrel, that's for damn sure. Anyway, I am done with Timewyrm Genesys. I am never talking about it ever again until I rank all the Virgin New Adventures in a single video, but nope. I don't think... Well, I said I was not going to read it before in 2017, but it's now strong in my memory, and the reason why I reread it is because my original video got removed and deleted. But what a pretty bad start for the Virgin New Adventures, but I know it gets a lot better. I'm going to have a cold shower, because this book is literal stench. I need to wash myself after experiencing Timewyrm Genesys. Flippin' Nora.